Assalamualaikum and hi. Today me and my friend will be present to you about the current issue in accounting, which is money laundering. Money laundering is regarded as a corporate operation that turns unlawful conduct into an asset or value. Although they may take many forms, criminal activities that fall money laundering have long looked for methods to transform their profits into assets that may be put to good use. To avoid drawing the notice of tax authorities or law enforcement agencies, efforts are undertaken to disguise the nature and sources of illegal money and integrated it into the financial system. Since it has consumed regulators and politicians for ages, money laundering is not a recent phenomenon. Investigations into money laundering instances will be challenging for authorities since many parties are frequently involved. The article we have chosen intends to promote awareness in official anti-money laundering writing in order to aid decision-making in compliance, policy and research. The report visualizes the rating data and offers a system for ranking anti-money laundering regimes. According to the findings, the current presentation of anti-money laundering gives minimal policy-relevant information, implying that subjective judgments and politicized interests may drive the policy agenda more than objective facts or social goals. The report emphasizes the need of generating policy-relevant information from the source data set of the sector and engage with independent critical policy effectiveness evidence. The paper's uniqueness stems from merging money laundering and policy effectiveness scholarship to assess anti-money laundering efficacy from a new angle. The research relies directly from the anti-money laundering industry's own data collection rather than money laundering or the interception of illicit proceeds. Money laundering can be defined as the act of hiding the ownership and source of money or assets acquired via unlawful conduct is known as money laundering. The goal of money laundering is to make illicit funds obtained through drug trafficking, human trafficking, crime, gambling, smuggling, and other unlawful operations appear to be legal tender. There are three evolutions of money laundering. The first one is during the ancient China era. Since many types of commercial activity were prohibited by provincial governments, affluent Chinese merchants they laundered by their gains. The government views merchant activities with suspicion since they are perceived as cruel and greedy and operate outside of accepted conventions. Black marketing, extortion, and bribery accounted for a sizable amount of merchant revenues. Merchants who remained unknown were able to keep their riches safe from the frequent extorting officials. As a result, they use measures such as converting money into exchange transferable asset and transferring capital out of the jurisdiction to invest in the firm. This approach is still widely used by the money launderers. The second one is during the Prohibition era. According to the legend, the term money laundering arose in the United States during the 1920s alcohol era. In the United States, organized crime could actively involve in the lucrative alcohol smuggling market, and in order to legalize their profits, they began combining them with those from legislative action. However, Robinson claims that the term was first used as reference to the Watergate scandals in 1973. He says that regardless of its sources, this case perfectly exemplifies money laundering. In this case, filter of illegal money was passed through a series of transactions, with the money coming clean or legal on the other hand. The third is during the 21st century era. Money laundering began to take a fresh approach during the turn of the century as the globe witnessed the arrival of technology and the internet, and thus a new facilitator for money laundering became accessible. The new phase of merchant fraud has been described as transaction laundering. The use of other payment methods, which held in concealment and anonymity, reveals some of this. Traditional procedures were updated and combined with new ones in examples such as prepaid gift, card smurfing, in which a sum of laundered money is divided and parceled into many cards. Transaction monitoring is disabled because they are deemed of low value. The advancement of e-business has resulted in an increase in the concealment of cash through the use of electronic currencies that include a large amount of data. As a consequence, emerging trends are combining old tactics with a new characteristics.
Hi, my name is Norifaliana binti Muhammad Suhaimi, and now I am going to explain about stages of money laundering. There are three phases of money laundering, which are placement, integration, and stacking. The first one is placement. The placement step of money laundering refers to the procedure of introducing shady or illegal funds into regulatory and financial structure. The thief will transfer the money from its source as soon as they have obtained the money through unlawful operations such as theft or bribery. When dirty and illicit money is inserted into the legitimate financial system, it is cleaned up and made to appear legitimate. Furthermore, there are a number of ways that illicit funds can enter the financial system. One of them involves the mixing of money. For instance, company will combine licit takeover with illicit funding. Since it has little to no historical cost, this is typically done through a cash business like a car wash. The layer step comes next, where different methods of layering monies are used to separate the proceeds of illicit activity from their sources. One of these two essential elements of money laundering discussing unlawful sources typically take place at multi-layer level. A layer is typically a complex transaction structure used to conceal the ownership and source of money. Layering activity might include using numerous bank and accounts, hiring specialists to act as middlemen, dealing through businesses and trusts, and layering sophisticated financial transactions. After successfully introducing the money into the financial system, money launderers will carry out a huge number of transactions. Criminals frequently use complicated transactions to hide their operation from law enforcement. The final step in the money laundering process is integration. Money will now be given back to the criminal by an authorized source. The economy will eventually absorb this illicit and corrupt money. Once the illegal money is finally deposited and covered, the cash will be accepted as legal tender by the financial system. To provide a believable explanation for how the money is obtained, information from credible source is carefully combined. This money will eventually be returned to the group by posing as a reputable source. It is quite challenging to separate riches or legal revenue from unlawful income at this point. Additionally, money launderers can now use the money without being discovered. To stop and combat illicit activity like money laundering, a system of law and regulation is known as anti-money laundering has been put in place. Anti-money laundering consists of key components, including the Know Your Customer policy, training and awareness program, transaction monitoring and reporting, compliance and auditing processes, and risk assessment and management. The Know Your Customer policies require financial institutions to understand their clients' identity and financial activities, enabling them to evaluate and monitor risks associated with their customers. Other than that, training and awareness program educate stakeholders on money laundering dangers, enhancing their skill and reducing the risk of money laundering operation. Furthermore, efficient monitoring and reporting methods help financial institutions spot suspicious transactions and alert authorities. Compliance program ensure businesses comply with applicable anti-money laundering laws, rules, and internal guidelines, promoting legal compliance and identifying gaps in system security. Risk assessment help organizations identify and assess money laundering threats, allowing them to allocate resources and develop risk-based anti-money laundering policies. Regular monitoring and evaluation of these measures are essential for reducing risk and ensuring the effectiveness of anti-money laundering measures. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so let's continue for the case of money laundering. The instance of Punakaiki seawash shows the ability for self-deception and the refusal to acknowledge the hazard of climate change. Punakaiki is a small New Zealand seaside village famed for its stunning rock formation that resembles stack of huge pancakes. However, the town is vulnerable to the effect of increasing sea levels and strong storms, which are expected to accelerate as a result of climate change. To counteract these concerns, the town spent millions of dollars to create a seawall, which is a barrier built along the shoreline to defend against erosion and floods. The barrier was viewed as a necessary precaution to protect the town and its infrastructure from possible harm caused by rising seas and strong storms. So, during a public town hall meeting, however, a citizen raised an important question. When should the community cease investing in the barrier and examine other options? This issue indicates indicates that the expenses of maintaining and strengthening the barrier may eventually exceed the advantage. Surprisingly, the offer to look into other solution was rejected. A vote was accepted to never bring the topic up again. So this is a sort of self-deception in which the community refuses to admit or address the potential limits or long-term repercussion of depending only on the seawall as a protective measure. The community expresses its opposition to admit the hazard link with climate change by refusing to entertain the topic and shutting off any debate. This resistance might stem from various factors such as a fear of change, financial investment already made in the seawall, or a belief that the seawall alone will be sufficient to address a future challenge. Okay, based on this article, several issues related to the effectiveness and impact of anti-money laundering efforts, as well as the challenge of decision making in the face of overwhelming evidence. So, this is the example of action and decision we can make. Firstly is ignoring the obvious. Second, discusses the phenomenon of willful blindness. Third is lack of credible data. Fourth is raise question about the validity and methodology. Next is the passage discusses the challenging of using FATF rating for analytical purposes. Firstly, by ignoring the obvious. When confronted with the question of when to stop investing and consider adoption, the suggestion was rejected and a motion to never bring up the topic again was approved. This highlights the capacity for self-deception and the unwillingness to acknowledge the obvious risk even when presented with evidence. The second action is the passage further discusses the phenomenon of willful blindness, where individuals or group refuse to acknowledge evidence that contradicts their belief or narrative. The example given is industry, those in the anti-money laundering area who fail to accept that anti-money laundering standard compliance might jeopardize policies aimed at increasing access to the financial system for the poor. This willful blindness hindered progress and only changed after an independent study showed that financial inclusion and effective anti-money laundering measures were complementary. The third action and decision is lack of credible data. Lack of credible data is one of the impacts and decision by the passage points out a scarcity of accurate data on the magnitude and rate of money laundering, as well as the efficiency of the anti-money laundering measure policies. While there is a wealth of data available on compliance with international standard and rating of anti-money laundering regimes, this data is not easily interpretable or comparable, making evidence based on policy making challenging. The next one is the passage also raised a question about the validity and methodology of the formal assessment process used to evaluate anti-money laundering regimes. It suggests that the assessment process lacks consistent and systematic data analysis and may rely on impressionistic or politicized judgment. The Financial Action Task Force, or we can call it FATF revised effectiveness approach, is also criticized for its inability to assess effectiveness accurately. Lastly, the passage discussed the challenges of using FATF rating for analytical purposes. While the ratings are meant to enable comparability, they also have limitations. The absence of an overall rating makes it difficult to assess system-wide result or compare countries' rating effectively. The passage argues for the need to provide a simple, accessible measure for comparing anti-money laundering regimes. Okay, so let's move on to rules and regulation for this case. Malaysia has enacted the Anti-Money Laundering, Anti-Terrorism Financing and Proceeds of Unlawful Activities Act 2001. The existence of money laundering legislation and regulation might raise awareness about how society can combat money laundering. Society should learn from the case that have been enforced in order to obey the government law enforcement. Section 41 of the Act describes various activities that are considered unlawful under the law. These activities relates to money laundering, counter-terrorism financing, and dealing with process of unlawful activities or instrumentalities of an offence. Let's break down each subsection. Okay, the first one is engaging in a transaction involve proceed of unlawful activities or instrumental of an offence. This refers to any person who directly or indirectly participates in a transaction that involves money or asset derived from illegal activities or used to facilitate a criminal act. The next one is acquiring, receiving, possessing, transferring, converting, exchanging, carrying, disposing of, or proceed of unlawful activity, instrumentalities of an offence. This subsection encompasses a range of action related to handling or dealing with the process of illegal activities. It includes acquiring, receiving, possessing, transferring, converting, and many more. Okay, let's move on to the third regulation, which is removing or bringing into Malaysia the proceed of illegal activity or the instrument of an offence. This provision addresses the act of moving funds or instrumentalities of an offence into or out of Malaysia. It is illegal to bring in or take out money or asset that are derived from unlawful activity or used in the commission to an offence. And is hiding, discussing or obstructing the determination of the real nature, and many more. This subsection cover action taken to conceal or obscure the true nature, origin, location, or other relevant details related to the profit general from activity or asset involved in an offence. So, based on the fact of this case, the citizen has failed to establish based on the balance of probability and to meet all of the basic standard specified in section 56(1) of the Amlatfa have been met, as well as to identify the nature and extent of the respondent involvement in the money laundering offence or to link the properties with predicate errors. As a result, the problem was written because of or in connection with an offence under section 41 Amlatfa on the balance of probability.
So next, moving on to the effects of money laundering. Firstly, undermine market dynamics. This will lead to resource misallocation and deteriorate the general strength of an economy by infiltrating and saturating lawful financial sectors and national accounts. Next is to threaten political stability, as the flood of money that has been laundered could give the criminal organizations and corrupt officials the opportunity to influence and control political processes, degrade democratic institutions, and maintain a corrupt culture. The third one is tax evasion, a popular type of money laundering which causes the government to lose money. This causes inadequate public resources to have an influence on social welfare, including healthcare, education, the development of infrastructure, and social welfare programs, especially for the weaker and more vulnerable group in society. The last one is difficult to monitor as money laundering has global consequences. It frequently includes international transactions, which makes it difficult for law enforcement to monitor and stop. This also makes it easier for organized crime, drug trafficking, human trafficking, funding fraud, terrorism, and other transnational crimes, further destabilizing countries and economy. So next, on the recommendation part to reduce or stop money laundering, the first one is evaluating risk and using the risk-based strategy. This entails a comprehensive assessment and understanding of the specific threats posed to their financial systems and national security. Next is establish and enforce laws that criminalize this offense. The basis of criminalization can be found in international agreements such as the Vienna Convention and the Palermo Convention, which provide a framework for countering transnational organized crime and money laundering. In conclusion, governments, economics, and society as a whole are significantly at risk from the repercussions of money laundering. It threatens the stability of the political and economic systems, skew market behavior, and causes resource misallocation. Money laundering has the capacity to support terrorism, finance crime, and maintain corruption. Beyond the direct terms of crimes, the damage spreads to a larger society by depriving governments of funding and impeding the delivery of crucial public services.